IVM.
Men will be men. Heard of that cliche before? A cliche that doesn't allow men to do a simple household chore. Men don't cry and are insensitive and tough. Well, men are humans and have the capacity to fully blossom in love. Women around the world are asking for equality. It's not just women. Men will benefit too with shared responsibility. Amidst the lockdown, gender-based violence has emerged with its ugly face. From domestic violence to abuse, boys' locker room is the new despised phrase. There are new stories everywhere, some untold and others in the making. Wise men are experiencing a transition within and an awakening. We rarely celebrate feminist men. Men who are changing the face of masculinity. They are the torchbearers of a new narrative that the world needs for the male fraternity. This is me, Almas, your host and host on Beyond Cliché, with someone who shares with us a new narrative, a new avatar, a new kahani. Joining me in the studio today is the founder of Men Against Violence and Abuse, Harish Sadani. Hi Harish, how are you doing?
Hi, Almas. I'm fine. Thank you for this opportunity.
So, for those of you who've just joined in and tuned in to this podcast, this is your host and host Al, and we are back on Beyond Cliché after a little bit of a break. I hope all of us are doing great with this lockdown. All of us are trying to find new ways to deal with the changing environment and the situation around us. The new set of episodes that we're going to do on the show this month and the months going forward will be around understanding how cliches and gender stereotypes are evolving around the COVID-19 period. So stay tuned in to more episodes coming up. Also, this is Almaz. I'm a change maker, author, speaker, and I have a campaign on change.org where I'm asking a leading diaper company to include the father's image on the diaper packaging. I think we all need this new narrative with equal parenting. So back to the show and back to the guest that we have today. I have with me somebody who is really creating a movement out there. And we are here to explore this lovely movement that he's creating, where he's including men as a part of the solution to the problem and not treating them as problem. So feminist men, is that even a term? We're about to find out now. There is a man that's nurturing the nascent movement on men and masculinity is taking shape in Maharashtra and several other states of India. For the past 27 years, his organization, MAVA, which is Men Against Violence and Abuse, has pioneered efforts in India to engage boys and men to change this narrative around the existing dominant model of masculinity, which is helping us prevent gender-based violence against women. So I am very excited about this show because I firmly believe that men need to participate in this discussion of equality. So Harish has a very interesting story, and I'm going to find out from him what was his upbringing like, what actually created this transition of Harish as a boy to the co-founder of MAVA today. So Harish, welcome to the show. How are you doing in the midst of COVID-19, by the way?
Oh, I'm trying to cope up with the new way of living. It's interesting that, you have to make adjustments, and at the same time, when your critical mass of people are also, in sync
Right.
with what you are planning, and, they are able to readjust, they are able to, give you the positive vibrations despite the negativism around.
Right.
So I'm quite thrilled, working with the limitations and with the uncertainty of times.
Yeah. Times are uncertain, but like I say, necessity is the mother of invention and the father of adaptation. So I guess all of us are adapting to new ways of living, and it's exciting to sort of record on this virtual studio with you. So Harish, tell us your story. I know that you were born in an environment where you saw a lot of abuse around you. In fact, you participated in the daily household chores, and people called you sissy at times. And that's where your journey and your introduction to gender stereotypes started. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so as you rightly said, I belong to a Sindhi family. My forefathers came from Karachi, in the pre-partition era. And, my parents, along with my other relatives, a joint extended family, we came in Mahim area where, which was mostly a jungle. And it was a single room. It was a chawl, a community dwelling where you could see the neighbor's life with close proximity. And, as you said, that I was, as a part of a joint family doing every single bit, what my siblings were doing, what my sister was doing,
right.
And there was nothing like, my three paternal aunts were the ones, who really shaped me, because both my parents were working because of circumstances. And, so these aunts really, kept the dialogue alive. They put a fine imprint on my character. So, I was doing small household chores to going outside, standing in a kerosene shop, waiting in a queue. And, there were boys in my building, residential building, and even my school classmates. They were teasing me that, what are you standing with your aunts and, doing all kind of these works, which are not supposed to be a man's work. You are doing like a girlish work. So I remember clearly that, I never took those taunts personally, but rather I used to think that if they're calling me like a girl, sissy, so like a girl means what? Like, is a girl undervalued or given a secondary treatment, that she's considered inferior? I used to think that. And then gradually when I used to see these, as you said, domestic violence from very close quarters, in neighbors' place, and even in my big joint family, numerous instances where the slightest provocation, where a man hitting a woman and, elderly people around, not intervening. So I used to think that what sort of existence woman has, like she is not able to decide for herself. And, those key things were keeping me disturbed as I was growing up. And then, as gradually I was growing up, when, I was probably around 17, 18, I was a great fan of this actress, Smita Patil.
Yeah, that's a very interesting part of your story, and I would love to uncover that. You had a pen pal, apparently.
It was a very unusual kind of pen friendship. So it started like me wishing her on her birthday. That time you might be knowing that there were magazines like Mayapuri and Madhuri, which is a filmy magazine, where they used to give the birth dates and, very interestingly, the address, in those times of the film stars or heroes,
Oh, really?
And Smita Patil's birthday and her address was given. So I said, let me wish her on her birthday. And actually, it was while wishing, I did express my feelings. So I think that must have stand out. And, she replied. And after her reply, it was like I used to watch her films separately in theaters, often alone, because those kind of films which were breaking the female stereotype, where, they were called as arty films, and hardly other men, used to go and watch those films, my class or other male friends. So I used to go alone. And, after watching, I used to feel disturbed, and seeing those films from a gender lens, I used to write letters to her, and in those letters, like, what questions baffled me, so I used to write that if, things you are trying to break the female stereotypes, well, what about the male stereotypes, and several such questions that I used to pose. And that really built my sensitivity and sensibility gradually. And, then when I was doing my master's in social work, at the Tata Institute of Social Science, it was then I was volunteering sidelines in a voluntary organization run by a women's group, and they were doing counseling, and they were I found a little disturbed that sometimes when there were cases of men who were incorrigible, the kind of measures this organization was taking up, like, blackening the face of man or doing a sit-in outside his home, such kind of intervention, does it help the woman in distress in any way? And I said, without talking to the man, and providing him a space to reflect what went wrong, why it went wrong, and a space where he could examine his behavior without doing any of that kind, and ostracizing him. I felt that's not a solution. I felt somebody needs, unless you talk with the men, so men also needed emancipation. So I was thinking in those days that, where the women's movement, I used to know, since the 70s, which is doing a lot of work, so the uh, absence of men in those movements, I felt it was a big gap that needed to be closed, and it was very coincidental that in 1991, after I completed graduation, my post graduation, then, I was working in a voluntary organization, CRY, Child Rights and Youth.
Right.
There's this journalist called C.Y. Gopinath. He's a very distinguished journalist. He was writing a column in the Indian Express daily.
Right.
And in that column, it was called Causes and Concerns. And on one social cause every week, he used to write. So one fine day, he and his team wrote a piece on wife battering. And, the pain from different walks of people was that, unless men's attitude change, nothing is going to happen.
Right.
So that made him think that why not give an ad or an appeal in the newspaper that will call for men. And if they come and think about it, my works ends there as a journalist. So he did that and he gave an ad like that,
That was a very interesting ad. It said wanted, right? Men who don't believe in wife battering. So I'm just trying to imagine the kind of progressive thinking you would have had at that point in time. And apparently 200 men turned up with different demographics or something like this, isn't it?
205, including me. So what was interesting that, C.Y. Gopinath tried to, these were all people who had written on postcards and in envelopes, that I am so-and-so and I feel this is wrong and it has to be stopped. I want to do something. And they were, men from different age background, different professional backgrounds. The common thing was that they were thinking this is wrong. And, interestingly, I was the only one, a trained social worker, in that entire lot. The rest were men who were engineers, they were bankers, one was a doctor, and there were some students, so the youngest one, interestingly, that time I think he was 14-year-old boy from St. Mary's.
Oh, wow. And he was for this.
Yeah, and he used to often argue in his classrooms with teachers, and the teachers brought to his notice the newspaper and said, read this, and you might find this interesting. And he wrote saying that, very interesting, his letter was that I'm not an adult and you may not take me in your group, but please do something. And, in his note, he wrote about that at bus stops, often he used to see that a man hitting a woman, and there are next door men as well as women who are standing and they are not doing anything. So he said that perhaps you are forming a group of only adult men and I may not have role, but please take me in. So I found his response very unusual, because normally when boys of that age, when they see an incident like that happening, they feel that as they grow up to be a man, they should behave like, otherwise they'll be seen like an infect husband. So, right from a 14-year-old boy to a 56-year-old man who said, teach women karate and everything will be taken care of. We had a mixed response. And I thought that if I could take the mantle and shape this movement, it would lead to a different kind of response. And, I would be laying the foundations of a different kind of movement, which is, so necessary. We registered in 1993. The ad came in 1991.
And you started the organization in 1993. Harish, so far we've captured some very interesting points of your life. right from the upbringing that you had with the influence of your paternal aunts and the environment around you, which was constantly provoking you to think. You were constantly asking questions. And then the kind of movies that had an impact with you, with your exchange of dialogue with a famous actress, moving on to then joining a social organization where you saw that men did not have an equal opportunity to sort of have the dialogue that they should have had. And then this entire ad comes in the paper, you join this movement, and then you take the lead and register this organization in 1993. So we've captured some important parts of your journey. We're going to take a short break here, and we're going to be right back with Harish Sadani and understand more about the new dialogue on masculinity.
Hey everybody, welcome to another amazing week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. While we're still going through lockdown, let me recommend a few quick shows for you to listen to. Check out Uncle Please Sit with Joel and Tushar. Really enjoy that show. They unpack some of the greater issues that we're facing, and I think you'll enjoy that. Also, do check out The Traveling Professor. That's a fun show that I think you're really going to enjoy as well. Fulia Bazi is a great show. It's a Hindi show about policy and things like that. They had a great episode last week. A close friend of mine from college, Joy Paul, was the guest. They talk about different social networks being used for different things. Very cool show. And lastly, let me tell you about Simplified. Simplified did a live episode last week, and we're making the first part of that available on their feed right now. So do definitely check that out. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And with that, let's continue with your show.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Cliché. This is your host and host, Almans, and joining me in the studio today is a very, very special guest. Normally, when we talk about feminism and gender equality, we usually have women that have started movements or are really trying to find a solution to a problem. But today we have somebody who has really pioneered this whole movement of how can we have more engaging dialogues with men. And he's a man himself. He is known for his work with young men in their 20s and 30s. He's actually mentored over 700 young men, reached out to over 3 lakh youths across Maharashtra in the last 11 years. He's also got a lot of awards, by the way. A lot of his work has been widely recognized. It was also documented by Harvard University, South Asia Institute, and Tata Trust. He's also got a number of awards, like I said. He's been invited to present his work on gender and masculinity at Berlin Human Rights Film Festival 2019 and a lot of other film festivals in Finland, in Norway, in Sweden, and worldwide. He's also a recognized TEDx speaker, and I'm going to talk more about the kind of recognition he's had as we go along. Coming back to join us right now on this conversation is Harish Sadani. Harish, welcome back to our show, and I have a very, very important question to ask you at this point in time. So,
Yes, sure.
You said that there were a lot of stereotypes that you observed while you were growing up, and also during the social work internship that you had. Question is, what are some male stereotypes that people usually don't talk about that you've sort of tried to address in your workshops?
Yeah, so, we find that, all the subsystems in our society, whether it's education, family, religion, the governance, or even the media, they are reinforcing, that notions about hegemonic or dominant masculinity, that a man has to be always winner, always an achiever.
Right.
He should be controlling his emotions.
Right.
He should not take no from a woman. So, I think, when in real life, you find that there are many occasions when men do cry. They may cry in privacy, but they,
Right.
They would like to express their emotions, but because of pressures to perform,
Right.
masculinity is always associated with performance. So at every stage, he has to show that he is a man, he's one step ahead of women. So whether he achieves the expected things or not, he has to show always wear a mask and show that he is always a winner. He exaggerates sometimes, even
Right.
before other male,
Right.
So I find
Because actually his identity is somewhere related to how much he's able to perform and achieve, and obviously provide. That's how we sort of categorize a man's identity into.
Yeah. And how he achieves, the emotions, how he achieves that, in what way, how is his relationship with others, that is immaterial. So when you find in today's time, in the 21st century, where, women are also achievers in the same way as men, they have achieved, So I find that in one areas where men are lagging is in terms of healthy relationships. So, we constantly talk about that, you might have achieved a lot, when we talk to youngsters. But what is one area where, in terms of your emotional well-being, your mental health, you find that a lot of pressures which are asking him to perform, as a result, he is into those rigid roles of masculinity that he's trapped, and he is trapped in those suffocating molds.
But do you think he realizes he's trapped?
No, exactly. Now that's the point, So, as you said, men are part of the problem. They should be seen as part of the solution. But what if men are in their slumber that they don't know that they are part of the problem? Or even if they are aware, because they don't want to leave the privileges and the power, they continue. But in that process, what happens is that they get dehumanized. So, so the critical part while working is to make them aware that, look, that their attitudes are part of the problem. When you say when they are part, it's not per se as men, but men's attitudes, men's mindsets, they are part, because all men are not the same. And this kind of mindset can be even in a woman, the male-dominated mindset.
I actually wanted to ask you this critical question, because my understanding is that the root cause of this entire problem is patriarchy, and you could have women that are patriarchal in nature and men that believe in equality. So where does the seed of toxic masculinity come from? Kahan se aati hai ye toxic masculinity? Are men born with it? I don't think so.
Yeah, you're right. So it's the conditioning, it's the social conditioning, it's the way their socialization is done. It's the way at a younger age you find, that, they are given an upper hand. In the northern India, you will find, along with the patriarchy, is a feudal mindset. The feudal mindset, which, wherein you find that if suppose a boy or a girl are in a family, as brother, sister, you will find if the boy is constantly addressed as Raja Beta, and the girl is not addressed as Rani Beti, so the message automatically is going that he has an upper edge, he has an upper hand, that he is something special, he's more preferred, and in smaller ways, the clothes you wear, the gifts which are given, the way a boy plays with gun and car and a girl is playing with dolls, so at a very younger age, you find certain games, household games are only where women are playing, outdoor game, it's only, men are encouraged, boys are encouraged. So you find that, in very direct and subtle ways, these kind of binaries, in today's era where we are there, these binaries have to be broken, because men and women are not seen in a typical heterosexual, in a heteronormative kind of a world. There is more, the gender is in a spectrum. So, when we talk with young men and boys, we tell them, to re-look at their upbringing as they're growing up as a boy, using different out-of-the-box methods, like interactive workshops, where they are able to see that how they were growing up as a child. And, when they stop their minds and simultaneously listen to others, they realize gradually that masculinity is not unitary. That there are other kinds of men, around them. And, they are able to examine. And, one of the ways in which we address the issue is through intergenerational dialogue.
Okay,
of
that's
men with boys. So when elderly men start talking with these boys, as resource persons, as facilitators, you find that the boys are able to reflect their own upbringing, and they realize that, oh, this is not so hard and rigid. I can change my ideas. I can change my thoughts about what it means to be a man by setting an example with myself.
But Harish, how do you find how are these men ready to participate in these workshops? I've always been intrigued with this idea of bringing men into a forum to discuss something like this. But like you said, men are in slumber, or there's privilege. That is why there is no need for me to be a part of it. Or maybe mere saath koi problem hi nahi hai. Hello, men around the world are like that. So how do you get these men to really participate and open up?
So, I work with college going boys who are around 18, 19, when I go to their college. So we work with a sizable number of young men, on a long term. So we select some boys, but usually before selecting, we have an orientation session at the start of the academic year, in select colleges. And then we talk before them, the entire class, where they are largely boys, but there are a few girls also present, just out of curiosity. Right. But there are a large number of boys who are present, whom we address what is the overall issue, the macro to the micro. We talk about gender-based violence, but along with that, we relate this to self. We interconnect. We connect them that how this issue is related to themselves, how the ideas they have when they are 18, 19, are really sowing the seeds of what they would be like a man post 5 years after marriage. So you're making them, and during this orientation session, we tell them, like something which attracts them, lures them. Say, for example, we tell them that if we provide you with scientific information about sexuality, if there are questions in your mind, which you have, see, some boys have questions on or issues related to relationships, breakups, and they can't even talk about those things even with a close male friend. Correct. So, we tell them that we will give you a platform where you can examine, where you can also talk one-to-one, take my team into account, which is a young team, and they will talk to you, and most importantly, when we will give you a space where, we are not going to judge you, that you are a man, you are a perpetrator, you tell them that, this is an open forum where you are treating girl students, your classmates, as equals, and companions. So you can talk anything under the sun. You can ask questions. You can talk about your personal experiences. So, you keep them a non-threatening, safe space where they can open up, where even they can talk about their vulnerabilities, which is very interesting, because, always it's understood that they will be under power, they will be with power, that they will not be vulnerable.
Absolutely. So vulnerability is equal to me losing my power, and therefore let me have this mask. And that mask is leading to dehumanizing men, as you rightly said. Again, I'm going to put a disclaimer here that we're not talking about all men. We're talking about the issue in general. There are a lot of men that realize the sensitivity of a lot of issues that we're talking about this, and we need more men like these to participate in the dialogue. And also a lot of women that do not understand the importance of this and are supporting patriarchy needs to listen to this conversation from an open view and with an open lens. So at this point, Harish, I'm going to also talk about gender-based violence and try to understand from you how diverse is it? Because one of the themes we want to address in today's dialogue is the boys' locker room situation that's come up, right? So pehle mujhe ye bataiye that how diverse is gender-based violence? What all is included in it? And where is the root of all of this coming from?
Yeah, so, gender-based violence is a very broad spectrum which includes, right from sex-selective abortions, which is before a girl child is born, before that, So you find systematically they are aborted right from there, or after she is being born, a girl child. Then how, different ways of neglect, malnutrition, and then as she grows up, how there are subtle, uh, ways in which she is shown that she's secondary, at home and outside. There are certain do's and don'ts which are told to a girl, largely don'ts, so those kinds of things manifest and in the life cycle of a woman. So then, whether if she is gradually growing up and, when she's studying in school or in college, then you find that, examples of sexual abuse, example of remarks which are passed on to her, verbally. Mm-hmm. So, one of the forms of violence, as you asked, is the verbal, which is, almost like a national habit, I would say, in our country, that, men of all ages have been, resorting to these swear words, bad, abusive words in the name of mother and sister. So that is rampant. But more than that, so whether then it is sexual harassment at workplace, any workplace, including educational institutions, including informal sectors, or, molestation and rape. But more than that, so, that's the broad spectrum, right? From, before birth till, even elderly women being abused, so domestic violence, even with mothers and even with wives. So it's a big spectrum. So I find one of the things, why... So, you asked what are the roots, so there is a word what is called as a rape culture,
Right.
So
and
we
want to talk about this specifically because, this sort of is steaming out right now. And this one incident that's happened around the boys' locker room in Delhi on an Instagram account has really blown up everything and people are having the dialogue. Harish, we're going to take a short break here and we're going to be right back talking about this rape culture that we have and how do we sort of deal with a beast like that. Stay tuned on Beyond Cliché. I'm going to be right back after a short break.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep or lose weight or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Cliché. This is your host and host Salmaz. I am an author, speaker, coach, and I'm also writing a book on change makers. And that reminds me that we have somebody in the studio who's also got Stories of Change as a manuscript with him, where he's featured a lot of men in the book in form of articles, men that have been torchbearers of really talking about equality and bringing about change in the society. Harish has also co-authored a book called Breaking the Molds in 2007. It's the first of its kind in India. It contains expressions by sensitive men on a wide range of gender, masculinity, and sexuality matters. Do grab your copy. By the way, there's also a magazine called Purush Pandana, which means men's expressions in Marathi. It's an annual magazine which really talks about a wide range of subjects around gender, masculinity, and sexuality matters. This magazine was also awarded prestigious awards by Maharashtra Sahitya Parishad and several cultural literary bodies in the past 25 years or so. So Harish is a well-known name in the space of gender equality, training, counseling, and welfare work, where he's engaging a lot of boys. So I have with me in the studio Harish Sadani, and we were talking about the recent incident on Boys Locker Room. I'm sure you would have heard of it. If you haven't, just type hashtag Boys Locker Room and you'll find out about this incident where a group of boys got together on a social networking site called Instagram. I'm sure we're all aware of what it is. They started this group chat around how could they, I feel really horrible talking about it, but how would they really molest and rape women? So Harish, we were talking about rape culture in the country, and I would like to know your views on Where is this coming from? And what are your views on this recent incident that's happened?
Yes, so I think the boys' locker room episode really brought out a lot of public outcry, and so when I reflect on that, what happened was certainly disturbing, but at the same time, it was not for the first time such a thing, has happened. The kind of verbal abuse, the kind of tactics used by the boys,
Right.
intimidation, body shaming, victim shaming, victim blaming, or threats that I will post your nude pictures.
Right.
This was not, perhaps in the era of internet, something which we have seen, but, prior to that, there have been several incidents, just in Mumbai, in December 2019, in a prestigious school, of Mumbai, there was this incident where, that time the instrument was WhatsApp used, so you had Instagram in Delhi. So what I find is, where does this, I was just talking about verbal abuse as the spectrum of gender-based violence. So, if making lewd remarks or, the normalization of violence, which you find day to day, the misogyny in general, talking negative about women, the sexism which is there, everyday sexism, which is, right from putting jokes or, lewd remarks in our day-to-day conversations. So,
movie dialogues to Bollywood songs, it is prevalent everywhere, and we're enjoying all of this without even realizing that it is deep misogynistic stuff, which is not healthy.
Right, so whether it's the dialogues or songs, a song like Nana Karte Pyar Tumhi Se Kar Baithe, and the next line is Karna Tha Inkar, Magar Ikrar Tumhi Se Kar Baithe. So it was as light a song like that.
Is gaane mein kya problem hai for the listeners who might have never found anything wrong with it?
So, for example, the interesting part, the first line may sound a very trivial kind of thing, that Nana Karte Pyar, that while saying no, I began to say yes. But the second line clearly tells, Karna Tha Inkar, Magar Ikrar Tumhi Se Kar Baithe. I wanted to say no, but I was made to say yes. Now that really tells that, several girls or, women who are being propositioned and they want to speak their mind, they cannot, so even if they don't respond when a boy proposes, or they keep their heads down while walking, they do not respond. So the boys get a feeling that today she's not saying, but tomorrow, someday or the other, she will definitely say yes.
And it's obviously coming from our Bollywood heroes modeling it, right? They're role models. So you also have songs like...
you had Shah Rukh Khan. Yeah. You had Shah Rukh Khan saying that, in songs like Tu haan kar ya na kar, tu hai meri kiran. So whether, who cares for what you think?
Correct.
So you had, Raj Kapoor, and Mukesh singing a song like in the 70s that, there was this famous song I always say, Tum agar mujhko na chahogi, to koi baat nahi. If you say no to me, then it's fine.
Yeah.
But the next line says, Tum kisi aur ko chahogi, to mushkil hogi. So it's a very subtle way of telling that you have to like me only. It's a very subtle way of telling that you have to like me only, which the Shah Rukh Khan of modern day says very directly and bluntly.
So this entire culture goes down to the 70s where these songs, and now it has reached a point where you have songs like Khali Phili Tera Picha Karu To Rokne Ka Nahi. He's literally saying that you have no right to stop me if I stalk you. So there is open stalking happening. There's objectification in the form of Jandu Baam and Tandoori Murgi that's happening. So we've reached that point now, and now there are conversations of very boys from privileged families that are getting onto these groups and having these chats. So Harish, what is the solution?
So, one part of that problem, why they are resorting to this and, is it's a very chronic kind of issue related. That is the issue of lack of comprehensive sexuality education. Education being a state subject. So every state will have to have its policy So, you had the NCRT, National Center for Research and Training in Delhi. They had sent modules to different states as to how sex education could be imparted if they wish to. So what happened in Maharashtra some 8 years ago, when the modules were sent, the MLAs, the politicians in our state legislature, they went through the draft, and when they saw the pictures of male and female anatomy, they felt that is something too much, and they threw in the basket. So now they misunderstood that talking about firstly male female anatomy in the right context is not something wrong, and most importantly, that's just one part of what is called sexuality education. The real part is where you give a space, you give an open space where boys and girls are able to talk about and understand that what is infatuation, what is attraction, and what is love.
And what is obsession? Also, what is obsession?
Yeah. And what's the difference between these three? Right. So and then further on that, consent and dissent, how to express a no, and how boys should respect that no, how they should not fall to peer pressure, all these things, talking about pleasure and repression on sexuality, Now, I find that these are topics which are tabooed, so you find in schools, most schools across India, wherever this topic about human reproduction is being there, you find teachers of biology, they try to skip away.
Right.
And sexuality education, again, because education being a state subject, in progressive states like Maharashtra, it is not there in schools across. There may be some private schools who may be having. So what I notice is that, a bulk of our boys growing up, majority across the country, do not have access to this kind of comprehensive sexuality education, where they could examine.
They don't have access to this information, and they have no idea what is happening to them with this entire peer pressure and the stereotype conditioning that they have been that they're growing up with, and that eventually results into a boys' locker room. And even when they land there and they are questioned, they are told, "But I don't think there's anything wrong about it," because there's lack of education.
Yeah, correct. So they feel that it's the male entitlement to privilege and power. These are the two things which the boys grow up gradually as a man, and they think there's a prerogative of theirs, and with impunity. So they, you find that, you might have read when this issue came to limelight about the boys' locker room, immediately there were some boys who started a boys' locker room, a second group, after the first group was still now being interrogated and investigated. So second group already with daringness has been started by some of the boys.
Oh, really?
So, these kind of things are disturbing, but you have to see that what is the alternative you are offering? So if 95% of the boys have in India the primary source of information on sexuality being pornography and blue films. So I find that if in the absence of any healthy dialogue, whether in schools or colleges or whether at home, in the absence of that, it's the peer pressure and resorting to these unreliable sources of information, but where there's bombardment of sexual imagery, where, right from using a mobile phone to hoardings where they pass out when they walk around the street. So you find that, there's a lot of bombardment of visual imagery and sexual imagery. So, in the absence of any dialogue on what is healthy and what is a healthy relationship, for the matter, you find that they will resort to that, and, and then when they commit any act which is seen as wrong by the wider society, it's easier to blame them as culprits. The same thing I would recollect the Delhi gang rape incident, what happened in a bus in the capital city. When those boys who were interrogated, they said that they were used to watching blue films. I find that, and imagine that there are so many such boys, there are dropouts, for whom there is no scope as they are growing up. So, one answer I've been telling, that institutionalization of the sexuality education, for which, there's no pressure group by the civil society bodies on the government that they should ensure that every growing up boy or a girl needs this, So I find
so important, Harish. So imagine somebody who's never been to school or has dropped out. What is their exposure to sexuality education? Nothing really. It is, like you said, it is porn. And that is why it's such a growing industry. And then there is addiction to it, and then you want to sort of explore more. So we've spoken extensively about the problem here. And one of the solutions you're recommending for sure is for states to institutionalize education. In fact, there are enough and more petitions even on change.org where my friends have started talking about it. If you can find one, sign on it, great. What are some other solutions? अब वो state तो अपना काम करेगा and there are activists doing work around it. But how can I, in my home, ensure that there is enough dialogue happening? What can I do? What are some other solutions?
So the other important thing which even like an organization like ours are doing, but even individually people can do, is to provide these spaces for conversations. The spaces which are non-threatening, the spaces where boys can talk their minds, at the same time listen to others. What are the ideas about masculinity there are? How do they get these ideas? Where they are examining themselves, where they are taking a pause, where they are reflecting, and one of the things our organization is doing to engage men in all this is use out of the box methods. So you use
like what?
Games,
some of the things
like for example, you have games, and there's something called power walk game. Now this is one of several of those methods. So in a power walk game, you select some 15 boys and including some girls as volunteers. They are given certain roles, and they are asked to stand at the start of the game in the center of a horizontal patch, if in a horizontal room. In the center, they are each of them given certain roles, like a role play. So they have to enter into a role. Say, for example, a boy gets a role that I am a Dalit woman of 30 years and I'm married and I have 2 kids. So, for the time being, they have to enter into that role. And while roles are given, and there are other boys, say 15 boys are given those roles, and the rest of the class is observers on the other side. They are observing this game because they have to take part in the discussion followed by it. So what happens, the animator or the facilitator will read out certain sentences, after the roles are allotted and after the participants are in the center of the line. They have made a line, but they are in the center. So what happens, as each and every sentence is read out, the boys, if the sentence is applicable to them in the new role that they have got, they will put up their one step ahead. But if it is not applicable, they go one step back. So what happens after, say, around 15 sentences?
Reflective and experiential exercise.
Yeah. So, they learn that, along with gender, there are other inequalities that operate simultaneously. So, somebody may be a Dalit man and a Brahmin woman. Now, at the end of the game, you will find that there are some men in the front of the race. Ahead of the game. And there are also some men at the back.
Right.
If patriarchy would have been the only cause, causing man-woman relationship, then all the women should have been at the back. But you find at the end of the game, there are some women in the front because of some other disadvantages.
Yeah, there is capitalism and there is caste system and there are many other issues that we're dealing with.
So you're making, through games like this, reflect on how patriarchy works. You have exercises in groups where they are made to think that how the gender works as a system, and that there are several subsystems. Say, for example, there, as I mentioned, family as a unit, as one subsystem. Education is one subsystem. Religion is one subsystem. So when you make those groups, subgroups, and boys are divided, and they are told that you have to talk about and think about how this subsystem is reinforcing certain ideas. And can you really bring about some changes in that subsystem.
Mm.
So, you're making them think. So if one group is focusedly working on family, the other group is working on education, the third one is working on religion, fourth one is working on governance, and the fifth one on media. So you have smaller groups, thinking in a smaller group and telling their minds to each other. Then they share with the larger group. And if anyone else has to add anything, so you'll find very interesting, each one comes up with examples and anecdotes that how that subsystem really is working to give powers to men and sanctions limitations on women.
Beautiful.
So you find they are themselves examining by giving their own examples. So it's not I or my animators are talking. That
it's a lot of self-reflection for sure. So
I have several of these methodologies, evolved over the years. So whether it's games, workshops, whether now in the last 7-8 years, the two medium which I'm really popularizing, one is street theater. Like, a street theater is a performance on a street.
It's also known as nukkar nataks in a lot of villages. We've seen a few of them, and they're very, very impactful because you have a live audience and you're talking to them in their language, and it's very relatable.
Yeah, so it's a 15-20 minute play, and even at a time, even if 100-120 people are watching, and if it's a 20-minute play, so the boys whom every year I mentor, I ensure that they, at the end of a workshop on theater, they will evolve a play on a current contemporary gender theme, and then they decide that we will do some 40 shows, 50 shows in the next 2-3 months.
Right.
So imagine if one single play is viewed or observed by 100-120 people. So if 40 shows, 50 shows they do. So this is something, a youth-friendly medium which I've been using, where their bodies become a vehicle. There are no props. Their own voice becomes the vehicle in the play. The other very interesting medium which I experimented, and it's showing magical, is the medium of traveling film fest. So the idea came that a 2-day film festival from say 10 to 5:30, you show different short films, feature films, documentaries. These are regional as well as some national and a few international with subtitles. So, you ensure that these boys and girls sitting in a big auditorium, either in a college or in a university or in a cultural space, hall, that they are watching these films and they are followed by interactive discussions. So I invite gender rights activists, journalists, media persons to interface with them.
Wow.
And I must tell you, I use the word magical. Literally, you find that they come up with their own thoughts and ideas. The boys relate to the films. They listen, this is a platform where boys listen to girls, girls listen to differently thinking boys. And that's how, and there are elderly people, there are lay connoisseurs of films who are invited. So, it's a small microcosm which you want to see in the wider world, where there's a human dialogue. And I'll tell you, now I'm in my 3rd year. So what happens, this 2-day festival, and I've called it as Samabhav, which means equanimity, derived from the word Linga Bhav, which means gender. So Linga Bhav says Samabhav, like Samabhav se dekho.
Right.
Samyak Drushti se dekho. Look with, equanimity.
Right.
And this festival, I must tell you, is first of its kind in India. And I've just finished my 3rd edition. So what happens, this festival of 2 days travel to different cities, 2-tier, 3-tier cities across India. And it also travels to 4 districts of Maharashtra every year. So in the last 3 years, we have now reached over 35 cities and over around 12 or 15
this kind of work should totally be applauded, and I'm hoping the lockdown opens up soon so you will be able to take your work to even more range of cities. So with this, I have one last question to ask you in this segment, which is right now with the quarantine lockdown situation that we all are in, what do you think is happening to the mindset of the men that are probably in slumber, not awakened yet, to realize that there is dehumanizing happening to them, or to people that are supporting this mindset. क्या हो रहा है घरों में और हम क्या कर सकते हैं इस situation में?
So you know what? I mean, the situation is definitely, aggravated. The domestic violence, you find there's a spike in domestic violence ever since the pandemic has outbreaking. You find that, because men are now at home, those who were outside, the boys, the children are at home, all the elderly are at home. And, so what happens? There is no healthy space or breather, even for the women who have been doing, so you find that there are two kinds of responses. There will be some men who will perhaps, and there are few I have noticed, across the country, there are few examples where men are realizing that the invisible contribution of women, and they are
finally getting some kind of visibility.
Yeah, household chores and, unpaid care, as you rightly said. So, I find that there are some who are contributing after knowing the contribution of women. So you find that, and some are giving quality time to their children, which, bonding between them. So I find, even though these are very few in numbers, but at the same time, as you were talking earlier, that the liquor shops being closed, for some.
We saw an example of what happened when the liquor shops were open for a couple of hours, which really talks about how big an issue addiction is. In fact, I was reading that in Punjab alone, a lot of boys have been admitted in rehabs because there's definitely drug withdrawal symptoms all over the place. There are these real-time issues. So what do you think is happening in these households? And how do we deal with that?
So, what has happened, it's definitely that it's put men into a position where, they have no choice but to examine that, the kind of world where we are, So on one side, if they want to continue with the hegemonic masculinity, they will continue to show more pressures on, women, showing their control over them, which will aggravate further. But at the same time, so in the absence of any conversations with them by others, by guided conversations, so it will be quite a while. It's only after the lockdown, because, short-term arrangements, I don't know how much will it work, So, it's going to take a while where, because I find that, girls and women who are finding it difficult even to talk to a helpline, even though there are some helplines available in cities like Mumbai. So because the question is, if they talk on a helpline, their numbers will be, monitored, and, their phones will be monitored, and, a safe space where they would be openly talking about it and sharing what they're going through is going to be difficult. Or even, the support of the police or shelter homes, for depressed women. So I find that in the current scenario, it will, rather I have counselor friends, who are doing counseling. They are advising that one should not, approach the police if possible. Like how you can resolve it through dialogue, through neighbors' intervention, through, sometimes talking to a counselor and getting the, how she can strengthen herself, psychologically better. So I find, those measures are there, but, in the absence of any talk with men, I think, it's only in the non-COVID times that, you will have long-term measures, you will have, the kind of dialogue which is more necessary. I find that, the response to domestic violence by women's groups, even in non-COVID times, they have never felt the need to talk to men. So, how will you think about that they will talk to men, during the COVID times? In non-COVID times, it was never felt the need. There were family counseling centers which were just talking to women and children. Mentors are meant to talk family as a unit, and family includes men. So, I find approach itself had some flaws in the past. And now, after post-COVID, at least, the dialogue, if it is there, men are brought into conversation.
There's definitely a need for larger forums. There's a need for counseling centers and sessions for men. So if I'm a survivor, there's a lot of stress on me going through counseling. But the one that is really the abuser, if I were to use that word, is not going through much counseling here, right? There is a reprimandation or there's a punishment, but there is no angle of real dialogue, engagement, or counseling. Harish, normally there's a cliche that men don't talk. But here I have a man with me in the studio, virtual studio, and he says men should talk and we need to talk more with men. I think it's been a great conversation. We've sort of highlighted so many issues, and we've also filtered out a lot of pieces of Harish's journey. His journey cannot be encapsulated in an hour or so because he's been doing so much work in this space. Clearly, Harish sees this as the most important piece for gender equality, which is engaging men in conversations as a long-term solution to solve this problem and have better examples of masculinity, right? Because clearly, I believe that feminine and masculine are two energies that are present in all humans. All souls have both energies, and the balance is important as long as we don't abuse it. So thank you so much, Harish, for joining us on this show. Any last thoughts that you have for people that are listening to this show, especially the men out there? What are some last thoughts that you'd like to share?
So, I would say that a healthy society, what are the foundations of a healthy society? A society where men and women live in harmony, in peaceful coexistence. They may have many differences.
Right.
But, if there is a healthy society, and the yardstick of a healthy society is healthy communication. I have been building up on a theory of change, which I've, amply demonstrated through my work. The theory of change is that when men have a healthy dialogue with other men, the male-female equation changes.
How beautiful is that? Right.
So if men have a healthy dialogue, I think, men have to realize that within themselves, there is a human being which is yearning to talk, which is yearning to share his mind and express. Yeah. So, that's how it's going to make him a fine human being, more than a gendered being. It's a fine human being is what he should be aspiring. And I think there's no way anybody stopping him and freeing him from the shackles of patriarchy, from the shackles of these notions and molds in which he has been suffocating for years. So he can be freeing himself once he starts the dialogue, once he introspects, and there begins a process of humanization for him.
Beautiful, beautiful. This is such an amazing conversation. This is a subject that really intrigues me, and it was so amazing to have someone like Harish in the studio to talk to us about this amazing concept. I'm going to end this entire podcast on something that I truly believe in, and that is that we are souls and not genders. So if we just sort of realize that and start looking at each other as souls that were born free, there would be no reason for us to go through this entire process of reconditioning ourselves. Nevertheless, there are people like Harish that are doing excellent work in this space. If you need to reach out to Harish, Harish, where do we find you? Are you on any social media platforms or any websites, any information that you want to leave with us?
Yeah, so, we have a very updated website, www.mavaindia.org.
That's mavaindia.org.
Or an email can be there if people want to write by email, because I'm constantly on the mail. So it is Saharsh, SAHARSH 267 @gmail.com. So
right. Any social media handles besides this that anyone can reach out to you? Are you on Insta, Facebook, Twitter, any social media handles?
Yeah, so my Insta is, I think, Saharsh 267. And my Twitter is also, I think, the same @Saharsh 267, my Twitter handle. And Facebook is Harish Sadani. So even on Facebook, they can find Mava Mumbai is a Facebook for my organization's Facebook name.
Oh, lovely. So we can find all the information there. Mava Mumbai, Harish Sadani on Facebook. He's pretty active also on his email, so do reach out to him. You can pretty much find me everywhere. My Instagram is where I'm most active, almasvirani_1111. Also, you're listening to Beyond Cliché with me, Almas. I'm a change maker, author, life coach, and I am extremely passionate about deconditioning the conditioned mind, which has been set up with stereotypes. I believe that human beings were manufactured and we can always go back to the free souls that we were created to be. We're going to have more conversations with more guests ongoing, especially in the face of COVID-19 where everything is changing. So stay tuned. We're going to have shows regularly. Also, you're listening to this on IVM Podcast. If you want to download this episode or listen to more shows, please log into www.ivmpodcast.com. So thank you so much. This is Almas signing off on Beyond Cliché. I will see you again with another episode. Somebody who has really moved beyond cliché. Thank you. Signing off. Bye-bye.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Bradman is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.